My name is Gene Gwill. I'm the president of the board of Tales of Cape Cod, the organization that owns this historic building. Tales of Cape Cod is delighted to host the first event in this weekend celebration of Kurt Vonnegut and the 50th anniversary of the publication of Slaughterhouse-Five. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I want to thank Britt Lay for his entertainment this evening. Thank you, Britt. I want to welcome special guests, members and friends of the Vonnegut family, as well as the trustees of the Sturgis Library. And in that vein, I wish to introduce Lucy Loomis, director of the Sturgis Library, who will tell you a little bit more about the events planned for the coming weekend.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting to see this place just filled to the brim. And I'm sorry if we couldn't fit anybody in, but hopefully that's not the case. My lovely husband, Dan Santos, passed around flyers about the weekend events. I hope that you'll join us for all of them. I have to say that the reading marathon scheduled for tomorrow is filled with readers. But if you want to be an alternate reader, you can certainly come and sit in the alternate chair. You can also, and you may have a chance to read, but you can also come and listen. I mean, just hearing Kurt Vonnegut's words read aloud in all their glory will be a really exciting event. So we have the room set up for lots of people to come and witness that, and I hope that you'll do that. Following that, and you don't have to come to the reading at all, but we have a cocktail party tomorrow night at 5:30, and we do ask for a $10 donation, but you'll get wine and cheese and also a sampling of Kurt Vonnegut's favorite drink, which was a Rob Roy. Sunday morning, how to doodle like Kurt Vonnegut and find your own style of doodling, a workshop taught by Joyce Grammer from the Cape Cod Art Center. It's great for adults, young adults, and kids age 8 and up, not good for young kids. That's going to be at the library. You don't have to register. It's free, but do come because it's going to be very exciting. At 2 o'clock, we're going to screen a filmed interview with Dan Wakefield by Pat LaMarche, who's right there, followed by an informal panel discussion with Pat, Edie, and our special guests, Julia Whitehead, Max Goller, Mark Leeds, and we hope you'll come. Again, no need to register. It is free, but we want to see a packed house. Our trustee, Greg, and our other trustee, John, are going to be leading the panel discussion, and we want you to share your stories about Kurt Vonnegut. We want to have you ask questions, about the special guests, and just really have a chance to talk about what you think about, what you remember. And finally, Sunday at 6, Chowder Fest, featuring Kurt Vonnegut's favorite clam chowder, cornbread, and other food. It's $25 a person. There are only a few slots left. If you want to get tickets, call us at the library tomorrow or stop by. We've only got about 15 seats left, so please do that. So it's going to be a great event. We did this 5 years ago in 2014. Most of our special guests were there, not Max, but it really was an amazing weekend, and we hope that this one will be the same. There is another special event at the Dolphin Restaurant tomorrow night. They have created a special menu for their specials, including many of Kurt Vonnegut's favorite foods. I would advise you make a reservation because otherwise you may not get a seat, but I think it will be really fun. What I've done is Edie has provided us with a menu that Kurt wrote in 1945 from Germany about all the foods that he wanted to eat when he got home. I have laminated them. They will be on all the tables at our Chowder Fest on Sunday. But I've laminated some copies so that you can look at them, and they also have pictures of him on the back. So I'll pass those around while you're sitting here. But please, thank you to Tales for hosting this amazing kickoff to our Vonnegut weekend. Please support them. They do amazing work. Thanks to Edie and John for everything that you contribute to us. Edie set up a beautiful exhibit of Kurt Vonnegut's doodles and letters and photographs, and we have some from our own collection. Please stop by tomorrow and Sunday, and we hope to see you there. Thanks.
It's my pleasure to welcome Edith Vonnegut Squibb to share her recollections of her father during his Barnstable years. Edie is a resident of Barnstable. She lives with her husband, John, in the barn behind the house where she grew up. She has 2 sons and 2 grandchildren. In her professional life, she is a painter. She has exhibited in galleries across the United States, and she is a contributing illustrator to the Franklin Mint Press and the New York Times op-ed page. Edie was raised in Barnstable. At the age of 17, she left Barnstable to seek fame and fortune abroad. She came back 20 years later to raise her family in this magical setting. Shortly after I retired and moved to Barnstable full-time, I heard Edie make a statement. She said that she thought her father was one of the smartest people she ever met. I thought that statement stuck with me. I don't think I've ever heard a child say that about a parent. Several years later, I was reading the biography of Kurt Vonnegut by Charles Shields, and I came across the following passage. Edie, when she was 12, felt all confused about life and God, and asked her father for guidance. His response surprised her. He said, "In the grand scheme of things, we are scarcely older than each other. We are both experiencing the same things at the same time for the first time. Like our dog dying was the first for both of us. I have no more handle on things than you do." Ever since that conversation, Edie saw her father as sort of a peer or buddy, a plain, ordinary person trying to sort things out in the dark, just like her. It's my pleasure to introduce Edie.
Oh my. If this isn't nice, I don't know what is. And that's something my Uncle Alex would say, just sitting under a tree having lemonade. But this is really nice for me to see all these familiar faces in this really, really beautiful building. It's such a pleasure to be here in this historic, beautiful building, and I want to thank all the people who have recently restored it to its grandness. It's my favorite building. It's one of my favorite buildings. Okay. Oh, sorry. Is this better? What a space to make a presentation about dear old Dad, who loved this building and loved the gardens at St. Mary's across the street. He was all over this town and could be found in the magazine section of the Barnstable General Store, formerly known as Miller's, or regularly at the Dolphin. He adored Rennie, whose restaurant it was, and now it's run by her daughter, Nancy, or next door at the Sturgis Library, or at the Barnstable Comedy Club, putting on plays. That is Kurt. Whoop. That's Kurt in the lower left-hand side. He would write the plays or be in them, my mother also. This is a bunch of people begging him to put on a play. He helped build the tennis courts at the Barnstable Yacht Club. We spent lots of time in our little Boston whaler going for picnics on Sandy Neck. It was always harrowing coming back at night in the dark with no running lights and parents on martinis. He used parts of names of local people for characters in his books. He based a short story, Who Am I This Time?, on the local postmaster, Eddie Souza. It was here in this village he wrote his most transcendent books: Mother Night, Sirens of Titan, Cat's Cradle, God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, and Slaughterhouse-Five. What distinguished myself and my siblings from everyone else on the planet was that Kurt Vonnegut Jr. lived downstairs. Much has been written about him, scholarly works and whole encyclopedias analyzing his words. From the vantage point of children growing up with him, we got to see a side no one else got to see. We got to see a tall man lumber from room to room, ducking his head down to clear the short doorways in our big old house. From the kitchen to his study with a cup of instant Sanka coffee, sloppily made with bits of freeze-dried granules floating on the top because he was too preoccupied to stir it in properly. We got to see him try to be a car salesman. He started the first Saab dealership on Cape Cod in the Pebble building in Barnstable. He thought the Swedish-designed automobile was high art. Here's our mother arranged on the hood of one. He was not a very good car salesman. Plus, it was not a very good car. It had suicide doors that hinged on the rear rather than the front. You had to add oil to it every time you filled it up with gas. And it only had 3 cylinders. But it looked great. So that business failed. We saw him try to do other things besides writing to make money, because no one wanted to publish his books at first. We saw him get a commission to design a meteor comet sculpture for a restaurant in Logan Airport. He built it in our backyard. It's not there today. I have no idea what happened to it. That was the beginning and the end of his career as a sculptor. He took a job teaching English at the Riverview School in Sandwich. It was not at all clear that he had a future in writing. We saw him struggle, we saw him give up, and we saw our mother coax him back to the study to write again. We saw him stand up for us in school and in general. We saw him worry where the next $20 was going to come from. Not till later did I understand that he was a writer. I had no clear idea what he did or if he was any good at it. I knew he spent his days in the L at the far end of the house. Then I read Sirens of Titan. I was 13. That book blew my socks off. Cat's Cradle was next. That's when I realized there was someone very unusual in residence downstairs. Thinking big thoughts, thoughts that dealt with the whole world and beyond. He took my breath away with his vision and devastating humor and what seemed like the truth to me. He was sweet and sour in the most delicious and frightening way. If the writing was going well, he was a delight. If the writing was not going well, or if he kept getting rejection letters, which we have hundreds of, he was not so fun, and you pretty much had to steer clear. Yes, he was technically my father, but mainly he was something else. I was merely a kid living upstairs who had the great privilege to be his daughter. I knew that at an early age. We were there when those books were conceived, and what that conceiving looked like was a man enveloped in smoke with a cigarette stuck to his bottom lip. talking to himself, typing in short bursts like machine gun fire, pausing, his head cocked as if listening to some distant garbled code that was his job to translate. Something was sure coming through those wires. He was like a television set that got channels no other television set got. I can tell you a few things that only those who lived in that house can tell you. He chewed Kleenex. Wads of it. If there was no Kleenex around, he'd tear off a piece of paper and chew that. I never saw the man chew gum. It had to be paper. He was addicted to something in paper as much as tobacco. Or maybe it was the act of chewing that helped his brain. He listened to the most god-awful music on the radio when he worked. The drone of elevator music was his perfect white noise. I'm going to play a little of what it was like now for you to get an idea. Had enough? I don't think this music would work for us the way it worked for him. But for him, it was what he needed to concentrate. And when he left the studio, he would play Miles Davis and Dave Brubeck and Mose Allison. So it wasn't like he had bad taste in music. He needed that dead drone, but it always amazed me. He played the piano beautifully, but just one tune. It was a little bit ragtime. My brother knows how to play it, I don't. He was passionate about defending vanilla ice cream. He would get so exercised about how overly vanilla ice cream was that if it wasn't for vanilla, chocolate would be bitter and taste horrible. He would congratulate you if you ordered a vanilla cone and say you were very wise and sophisticated to do so. I would order the vanilla, but I really wanted peppermint stick. That's with him. When he wasn't writing, he was painting or sculpting or gardening. He was a wonderful gardener and was partial to iris and hosta. He resented tulips for being short-lived. He was ambidextrous and could write with his left or right hand, though I never actually saw this demonstrated. He would just go like this. He would take a long walk every day around the pond, behind our house, through the Audubon trails, and then along the salt marshes and back with our mutt sheepdog, Sandy. He called this walk his constitutional. Oh, I have a picture of it. He really loved that dog, Sandy. We all did, even though he had some kind of skin disorder we called marsh rot. He couldn't be bothered with food. He made mayonnaise sandwiches for himself for lunch. Just 2 pieces of bread with mayonnaise inside, nothing else. Maybe a smear of mustard now and again, but that was it. So, I know you're all here to hear about Kurt Vonnegut, but I'd like to put him aside just for a minute. And you know plenty about him already, so I think I can do that. I want to talk about our mother, Jane Marie Cox Vonnegut. She and Kurt had been in kindergarten together and in Indianapolis and were college sweethearts. She graduated with high honors in Phi Beta Kappa from Swarthmore College. They married in 1944. Yet you probably don't know anything about her unless you lived in Barnstable and knew her here, if you were lucky, that is. Could anyone raise their hands who knew Jane? Yes. So, honestly, I'm not making this up. Kurt would never have become a writer if it was not for her. I know this because of a crushed box of letters I found up in the attic of our house, under a pile of old Christmas cards and partially full S&H green stamp books. There were hundreds of them. If you don't know what they are, but it sounds like you all do. None of them were completed, but I think she wanted a wearing blender. I don't know, I never had that. But there were 96 letters in that crushed box. This is the box. When they were 20 to 24 years old, 2 years before the war and 2 years after the war, these were written. They will be published by Random House in 2020 to be titled Love, Kurt. She saved his letters. He did not save any of her letters. But it's pretty clear what the story is. And it's an astounding look into the earliest fledgling sparks that ignited Kurt. And our mother was the sparker. She steeped our father in the classics, tempered him, inspired him, encouraged him, edited him. And I'm not making this up. It's from these letters that I learned just exactly how influential she was to his turning out to be the writer Kurt Vonnegut. I will read parts of these letters to you so that you will know too. I'm just showing part of one letter just to show how beautiful they are just as letters. But in this one, it's dated November 11th, 1945. He's just turned 23. From Kurt to Jane. From your loving me, I've drawn a measure of courage that never would have come to me otherwise. You've given me the courage to decide to be a writer. That much of my life has been decided. Regardless of my epitaph, to be a writer will have been my personal ultimate goal. You've given me a million ideas and a drive I've never had before. You are the one person in this world to whom I like to write. If ever I do write anything of length, good or bad, it will be written with you in mind. Here's another one. Sweetie, you scare me when you say that I would have been Shakespeare had I lived then. And you scare me when you say that I am going to create the literature of 1945 onwards and upwards. Angel, will you stick by me if it goes backwards and downwards? Holy smokes, what if I turn out to be just plain folks? Here's another one. I'm afraid. I've promised and vowed to build air castles and beaten my chest and torn my hair, telling what you and I would accomplish. I get sick with fear that I'm a bluff, that I'm actually no damn good, that what I've sworn to do is impossible for a person like myself. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. I don't want to let you and your fantastic hopes down with a thump. I don't want those fantastic hopes to take the place of love. I don't want successes to become the consummation of that love, because failures will be the death of it. I want love to exist for itself alone, separate and perfect and adequate, no matter what. Because it's on love's account that I'm glad I'm alive. It's on love's account that I'm willing to see life through from start to finish. Up until the time we were married, I was sorry to be alive. And after seeing air raid shelter after air raid shelter filled with dead humans of absolutely every description, was willing to leave at any time. And finally, I call this the Dresden letter. My father, 22 years old, after having survived the firebombing of Dresden as a prisoner of war, wrote to my mother, I've got to say it and at length. You've got to make me do it. And you've got to forgive and correct my mistakes and make me see what was important about what I've seen. You've got to ask me questions to make me remember. And I didn't want to write about it before, because instinctively I knew that I was missing something awfully important, that anything that I would write about it would fail to reveal the significant. And right now, I'm in a frenzy of trying to remember every damn thing that happened. It's going to be long and revealing, and I'll not be able to do it without your help. It is perfectly clear that my mother ignited that man. He could not have done it without her. It says exactly that in these letters. She saw in him what he could not see in himself. On their honeymoon, she made him read Brothers Karamazov just to put him on the right track. Jane and Kurt were co-pilots for all those years. And then they had that big baby they had been expecting, the baby named Slaughterhouse-5, conceived in 1944, delivered in 1969, a 26-year gestation. It was a very difficult delivery, let me tell you, and the body of Kurt and Jane did not survive the birth. Not once did I ever hear our mother say, "I helped that man," or "I edited those books." She never clamored for credit ever, but she really, really deserves some credit. There are so many more extraordinary illuminating letters, but you'll just have to wait for the book. Plus I start crying, and that's not productive. Now to go back a little, to get a wee bit unstuck in time, my parents came to be in Barnstable via Provincetown, where we spent one summer in 1952. There was a reunion. We lived next to, I think, Norman Mailer. There's just writers and playwrights and poets everywhere. But that's my father on the left and his sister, and my mother in the middle and his brother up top, and all of us kids. So thinking of Cape Cod, thinking all of Cape Cod would be like Provincetown, full of artists and writers and playwrights and poets. He quit his job at General Electric, determined to be a writer, and moved to a tiny house in Osterville. Needless to say, Osterville was not Provincetown. He and my mother joined a great books club, which gave them friends from all over the Cape who loved literature. One of these people was Dick Gallagher of Barnstable Village, who told them of a big old house and barn for sale with amazing sunsets and salt marshes beyond. They did not need a house that size with just 3 children. It had 12 rooms and just went on and on, but they bought it anyway in 1955. I was 5. It made no sense. Then, 3 years later, on September 15th, 1958, the big house suddenly and tragically made sense. Between a freak accident when a train went over an open drawbridge into Newark Bay and breast cancer, my Uncle Jim and Aunt Alice died within 36 hours of one another, leaving 4 orphan boys, aged 2, 8, 11, and 13. Peter, Tiger, Steve, and Jimbo. Before my Aunt Alice died, she asked her little brother, my father, to please keep her boys together. That's Kurt with his sister. Overnight, we went from a family of 5 to a family of 9, plus 2 dogs and a bird. Oh, Jim, Peter, Nanny, Jane, Kurt, Tiger, Sandy the dog, me, Steve, Mark, and Yogi the dog. If you want to read more about this, my mother wrote a book titled Angels Without Wings, describing it in great detail and beautifully. The book is out of print, but can be found at the Sturgis Library. I hope someday someone will republish it, as no one describes better what it was like during those most formative years. Not only did Jane provide the inspiration, encouragement, and editorial skills necessary to bring into being 6 novels, countless short stories, 2 plays, and Slaughterhouse-5, guess who was also making sure everyone had a birthday cake and made the dentist and doctor appointments, the sports practice, the music and swim lessons, the shoe shopping and keeping the refrigerator full, the laundry, who was always there cheerfully and lovingly to each of us. It was Jane, known as Aunt Jane to practically everybody else. All that with a house full of 7 children needing things, 4 of them freshly orphaned. This is our first Thanksgiving. That was November. She created the warm home and spirit for all of us to thrive, not just Kurt. This is our first Christmas card. This one didn't make it in the mail because it messed up the Vonnegut. There were massive meals every night. Her mashed potatoes are legend. She held huge birthday parties. She was famous for stringing yarn through the house that led to clues for scavenger hunts, and for her crooked cakes. Kurt was not successful yet. We had very little money. There was a lot of kielbasa at the dinner table. Our house was usually a mess. All of our friends loved being in our house. We had impromptu music festivals by banging on pots on the kitchen floor till all hours. She allowed the mess and chaos. Good housekeeping fell by the wayside. She couldn't do it all, and her priorities were keeping us sheltered and fed and happy. She once resorted to putting index cards all around the house saying, "Hang up your coats, put dirty clothes in the hamper, flush the toilet," which we made jokes of by writing on the cards things like, "Brush the toilet." She was both amused and frustrated at the same time. Our parents rarely came to the second floor of our house, where we kids lived. She would yell up the stairs to throw our laundry down. I always thought she was a messy, messy person until we all moved out. She was neat as a pin. There were contests in the kitchen to guess the date on certain rusty canned food items in the back of the refrigerator. One friend of Tiger's said our kitchen was the only place in the summer where he felt he had to wear shoes. The 2 dogs, Sandy and Yogi, were always underfoot, and 2 Siamese cats, Zenith and Sin. Sin had an eyeball that looked like it was falling out. Come to think of it, the eyeball was probably actually falling out. Our house had a certain reputation as perhaps a place where there was no parental supervision. Some parents worried about their children. When they came here, they thought it might be too wild. It was wild and chaos, but fun and never bad. There were so many people who made our home their second home. Jody Clark, Faith Cummings, Richie Parmenter, Sonny Jordan, Tony Thompson, Allison Mitchell, David Swift, Caleb Warren. I have no idea how my father got any work done. Yep. No wonder he was grumpy sometimes. In our house, there was constant foot traffic. He was always wondering how he was going to make ends meet, and us kids, oblivious to the enormous weight on the poor man's shoulders, banging on pots and pans in the kitchen, having a grand old time. He was 36 years old when the Adamses came. I think it was hard for him most of the time, but sometimes when the writing was going well, or he sold something, he would come out and play with us, piling us all in the car for trips to the National Seashore to see giant waves after a storm, or conceiving games like the Marsh Tromp. The Marsh Tromp was a game we would play once a summer. At dead low tide, we would go to the edge of the salt marshes, pick a point out about a quarter-mile west in the marsh, and make a straight line to that point. You could not go around the channels. You had to either jump through them or go through them. That's Kurt there with his hat on. You sink sometimes up to your waist in the mud. That's our mother on the right. we'd end up in West Barnstable and would march home along the railroad tracks and around 6A, covered in mud. We did this every year for about 5 years in the 1960s, and every year the trump grew larger. People came with elaborate ways with duct tape to strap on their shoes so the marsh mud wouldn't suck them off. Then, in 1969, there's another one. Slaughterhouse-Five was published. All of a sudden, people wanted to take our father's picture. Time magazine came to do a story. I was in Time magazine. Peter Fonda came for a few days to try to buy the rights to Cat's Cradle. Jack Kerouac came and sat around our coffee table. He was very drunk, by the way. Publishers from London came, and producers from Los Angeles and New York came. I've always called it the big kaboom. Everything changed after that. Kurt went to New York City, and the rest of us grew up and scattered. That window of time from 1958 to 1969 was an exhilarating, messy, chaotic oddball of paradise for me. There was a feeling of oneness to it. It was called SOWF, the substance of we feeling, my mother called it. My husband John and I live on the property now where we raised our 2 sons. Dad would visit often, and I'd set him up with a typewriter in his old studio. He painted that door, by the way. It's still there. He asked me to take some photographs of him for a book he was working on the last time he visited in 2006. This is my favorite because he looks so happy. I think he was mainly happy because I let him smoke inside. Since he's been gone, we've had 3 Memorial Marsh Trumps. The first year, it was a family reunion. It's just exploding off these are grandchildren of Kurt's, my brothers and sisters. Sometimes it looked like a terrible plane accident. The scene of a horrible accident, but it's actually fun. It was really, really fun. We always helped each other out of the muck. And at the end of the first Memorial Marsh Chomp, we found a tidal pool at the end of it and buried his sneakers and a pack of Pall Malls. And then we carved an oar with his name on it and nailed it to a secret place. For the last Trump, we wore formal wear from the thrift store. It's the same thing, but just in dresses. You have to have a photo shoot when you're in a dress. Someone suggested we go as pilgrims next time. And this is a wonderful last picture of Kurt being happy. And finally, I'd like to play an audio clip of Dad reading a passage in Slaughterhouse-Five.
Billy Pilgrim could not sleep on his daughter's wedding night. He was 44. The wedding had taken place that afternoon in a gaily striped tent in Billy's backyard. The stripes were orange and black. Billy padded downstairs on his blue and ivory feet. He went into the kitchen where the moonlight called his attention to a half bottle of champagne on the kitchen table, all that was left from the reception in the tent. Somebody had stoppered it again. "Drink me," it seemed to say. So Billy uncorked it with his thumbs, didn't make a pop. The champagne was dead. So it goes. Billy looked at the clock on the gas stove. He had an hour to kill before the saucer came. He went into the living room, swinging the bottle like a dinner bell, turned on the television. He came slightly unstuck in time, saw the late movie backwards, then forwards again. It was a movie about American bombers in the Second World War and the gallant men who flew them. Seen backwards by Billy, the story went like this. American planes, full of holes and wounded men and corpses, took off backwards from an airfield in England. Over France, a few German fighter planes flew at them backwards, sucked bullets and shell fragments from some of the planes and crewmen. They did the same for wrecked American bombers on the ground, and those planes flew up backwards to join the formation. The formation flew backwards over a German city that was in flames. The bombers opened their bomb bay doors, exerted a miraculous magnetism which shrunk the fires, gathered them into cylindrical steel containers, and lifted the containers into the bellies of the planes. The containers were stored neatly in racks. The Germans below had miraculous devices of their own, which were long steel tubes. They used them to suck more fragments from the crewmen and planes. But there were still a few wounded Americans, and some of the bombers were in bad repair. Over France, though, German fighter planes came up again, made everything and everybody as good as new. When the bombers got back to their base, the steel cylinders were taken from the racks and shipped back to the United States of America, where factories were operating night and day, dismantling the cylinders, separating the dangerous contents into minerals. Touchingly, it was mainly women who did this work. The minerals were then shipped to specialists in remote areas. It was their business to put them into the ground, to hide them cleverly, so they would never hurt anybody ever again. American flyers turned in their uniforms, became high school kids, and Hitler turned into a baby, Billy Pilgrim supposed. That wasn't in the movie. Billy was extrapolating. Everybody turned into a baby, and all humanity, without exception, conspired biologically to produce two perfect people named Adam and Eve, Billy Pilgrim supposed. Billy saw the war movie backwards and forwards, and then it was time to go out into his backyard to meet the flying saucer. Out he went, his blue and ivory feet crushing the wet salad of the lawn. He stopped, took a swig of the dead champagne. It was like 7-Up. He would not raise his eyes to the sky, though he knew there was a flying saucer from Tralfamadore up there. He would see it soon enough, inside and out, and he would see, too, where it came from soon enough. Soon enough. Overhead.
I love that we can hear his voice clear as a bell today, and hope that he can hear our voices clear as a bell tomorrow. If anyone can, he can. Thank you all for letting me share my recollections of my father and my family.